Pro Rescue is housed at my business of Design Impacts, and 5 of my staff, including myself, are volunteers with Pro Rescue. So when the earthquake occurred, we got dressed in our PPE, in our orange, but we didn't know where to go. It was very difficult for the phones to work, so I received a message that there was an entrapment at island time, so that's where we went. So the earthquake occurred at 12:47. I got that message at 12:54, and at 1 o'clock we arrived at the Billabong Building. So when we arrived, we needed to assess the building. There was a lady who had just passed. I took her pulse, but she couldn't be saved. So then I assessed the building. I walked around, tried to find where people might be trapped. Around the back of the building, there was a lady whose arm was in between 2 pieces of concrete, and there's a concrete slab hanging above her head. So if there was an aftershock, she was in trouble. So we went inside the building for the first time, and we used our airbags to lift the concrete up to get her arm out. And I think we had her out of that building within a half an hour. So by 1:30, we had saved our first person. And one of the things that she did say is that that she could hear her friend behind her in the building. So as more and more people arrived, more rescue members and more members of the public, members of the public and the VMF started to take the roof off the building, where that lady could be heard. I went around to the front of the building where members of the public had said they could hear people, and underneath the front of the building there was a boy who had his arm trapped between all the roof and on top of a car, and his mum and his cousin were all trapped. So we started working on there. Pro Rescue doesn't train in USAR or have the equipment for a building collapse. So we tried to use our airbags to lift the weight up so that we could get to these people. But our airbags weren't strong enough. They couldn't lift the concrete. So at this time, I was called up onto the roof because they'd found the second person. So I got down underneath, and once this lady also had her arm trapped and her leg trapped. So we lifted the slab up this time with some hydraulic tools, which got her arm out, but then her leg wouldn't come out. So for the first time, one of my rescue members had to come inside the building, and that was, out of everything I did over that 27 hours, the hardest thing to do was to risk my own people. I would always say to them, can you go in there and do that? And if they said no, that was fine. So risking people was hard. But I have this little fella who works for me in rescue. So he came down inside the hole, and he's very smart. And with the airbags, we got her foot out and we got her up. So then we were back to the front where these 3 people were, and the police commissioner closed the site down for a little while. He was concerned for our safety, and he'd received word that teams from Australia and New Zealand were coming in, and his preference was that we waited until the teams come. I didn't feel that the people that were trapped would be alive by the time the Australian team arrived. So I took him through our plan on how to get the people, and he asked if I was prepared to take control of the scene, and I said yes. So then I called a meeting of all the key people. Like there were civilians down there had started to arrive, like with big forklifts and excavators and jackhammers and concrete saws. So from that moment on, so we got that first lady out, and she told us, and one of the things that she did say is that her friend, that she could hear her friend behind her in the building. So as more and more people arrived, more rescue members and more members of the public, and the VMF started to take the roof off the building where that lady could be heard. I went around to the front of the building where members of the public had said they could hear people, and underneath the front of the building there was a boy who had his arm trapped between all the roof and on top of a car, and his mum and his cousin were all trapped. So we started working on there. Pro Rescue doesn't train in USAR or have the equipment for a building collapse. So we tried to use our airbags to lift the weight up so that we could get to these people. But our airbags weren't strong enough. They couldn't lift the concrete. So at this time, I was called up onto the roof because they'd found the second person. So I got down underneath, and once this lady also had her arm trapped and her leg trapped. So we lifted the slab up this time with some hydraulic tools, which got her arm out, but then her leg wouldn't come out. So for the first time, one of my rescue members had to come inside the building, started to lift things and how they would move. So Francois really, if he hadn't come along, it would have been less safe for us to work. So we came up with a good plan to reduce the weight so that my airbags could work. And then about 11 p.m, the 13-year-old boy, we gave him a piece of rope, and if he thought he could pull on it to signal us, and we were getting very, very close to be able to lift the slab off that would allow us to get to him. But just after 11, I went back inside, and he'd dropped the rope, and he wasn't communicating with us anymore, and he had passed. But Francois' plan worked, and with a big container forklift, an excavator, another forklift, we reduced the weight, let the airbags then lifted, and we had enough space. So another one of my rescue members, and his name is also Troy, he went inside, and there was a piece of aluminium sheet that was blocking the way. So Troy crawled inside, and he cut that sheet into pieces until we could reach Peter's mum and Peter's cousin, and then we got them out, and they the cousin came out just before midnight. So what's that, 11 hours after we started, we had managed to save 4 people, but we'd lost 1. And around about midnight, the lady on the other corner, she was still alive at that point. Some of the rescue team had been assisting that lady's family on that corner. The bravery of that family trying to get to their loved one was just incredible. There was no more than that space, and they tunneled into, it was one of their mums and one of their husbands, and they tunneled into her. It was incredible what they done, and they knew where she was, because she's actually the one that put the message out in the first place that she was trapped. So she was on the phone, so they knew, and they knew the shop, so they knew where she would have been located in the building. So they made a path to her, and it was a very, very small space. So there was not many of my team that actually could have fitted. So we provided them some simple tools and instructions, and like a first aid kit that if they released us, she started bleeding. We taught them some basic first aid, hemorrhage control. So around about 2:30 in the morning, they finally got her free. But she'd been trapped by compression at this point, somewhere around 13 hours. And trapped by compression means that you've got something pressing down on you, and then when it's released, it quite often can be fatal. And unfortunately for the family, like, it must have been devastating, because they had been working so hard to get to her. They finally got her free, and then she passed. And we could see into the tunnel that they made that they were attempting compressions, and they brought her out, and there was nothing that could be done for her. So at this point is now 3 in the morning, and I'd been going since 1 o'clock the afternoon before, and I was very aware that I was tired, and I was very aware that I was making life and death decisions, and I was really afraid that I was fatigued, and being really, really tired can be like being drunk, and I knew that I needed to get out of there, away from the site. So I left the site at 3 o'clock in the morning and said that I'd be back at 7. Tried to get some rest. While I was away, there had been some tapping back near the front door of the building, and it was some family arrived for a missing person, and a lot of effort went in to try to find the source of that tapping, and the hope that it was hope that this young man, but unfortunately when they got to him, he had also passed, but the tapping actually was coming from behind him, and there was a young man called Lester, and Lester and his mum had been in the dark for so long, and so we established where they were. So when I got back at 7 in the morning, they had pinpointed where Lester and his mum were in the building, and there was a rolled up roller door, and that's where the sound was coming from. So we really hoped that Lester was tapping the roller door, and if we removed the roller door, we were going to see Lester and his mum. But that might happen in Hollywood, but real life, we removed the roller door, and then we were just faced with concrete. There's another man that did an amazing job down there. His name was Josh, and he owns a construction company here. Josh and his offsider had been very instrumental early that afternoon, like getting through the roof to get the second person out. And Josh was in there with his concrete saw and his jackhammer and trying to get through this wall. You couldn't even see him. There was so much concrete dust flying out, and I just thought that it was just going to take too long, and it seemed to be very dangerous what Josh was doing. So by this time, Francois had also gone home for a rest, and another engineer called Cyril was there at this time. So I started a working relationship with Cyril that would last the rest of that day. Cyril reduced the weight, so and this time a crane had come from the Brunei family, so that made like taking slabs off the top to reduce the weight much easier. Instead of going through the concrete wall, we reduced the weight, used the big container forklift and picked it up, just enough, 500 millimeters, to get somebody over the top of it. There was lots and lots of sharp edges that we padded, and then while all this was happening, Lester, the young boy, he could crawl to the front of the shop and he was tapping, but his mum was in the middle of the shop and she was like too afraid to move. Somewhere around 8 o'clock in the morning, for the first time since the building collapsed, Lester would have seen light. And we were calling out to him and he didn't want to leave his mum. And we said, like, you come to us and we'll go and get your mum. So he resisted us for a while, but then he came around this corner and he just saw this gap to the outside, and he just accelerate, like he just like come around the corner, like really quickly crawling up over the wall, and he was out. Like when he saw the outside world, he was just so. And then when Pro Medical were treating him, we interviewed him, worked out where his mum was, and then one of my rescue members followed his instructions and went over the wall and around the corner and provided light so that Lester's mum could see her way out. So he guided her out, and then so that was the sixth person that we'd taken out of there alive, and it's probably 10, 11 in the morning now, but Lester had told us that there was one more lady that they were communicating towards the back of the building. He hadn't seen her, but he could talk to her, so we knew that there was one more person left alive. So another rescue member who was incredibly brave, he went over the wall, around the corner and into the dark. Like he had to crawl towards the back of that building, and he got to this lady so that he could talk to her, and then so Cyril above her tapped on the concrete. Mikey had a radio, so we basically played hot, warm, cold. So the lady would say to Mikey, you know, whether the sound was getting closer or further away from her, and then we used a tape measure, and we were very confident where this lady was. And now it's probably 1 in the afternoon. She'd been in there a long time without water. So it would have taken a long time to work through the building towards her. So we, with Cyril, we came up with the plan of using an excavator to like break a hole through the floor and then use jackhammers to like make that hole bigger. So the first time we made that hole, we were just short of her, and there was a concrete beam blocking. But Mikey went back in there. She was still okay. So we repeated that process another 2 meters on, made that hole bigger, and then a young rescue member called Massing went down inside the hole and shined the torch, and then there she was, just like 3 meters away from him. So Massing just threw her a water bottle, cleaned up all the sharp edges, like put a tarp in, because the last thing you want is these people are so close to freedom that they're going to hurt themselves. So we made a safe path for her to come out, and she crawled towards him, and then Massing came up out of the holes. We brought her up out of the hole, and this was now 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Ironically, even though that I was in control of that scene, for the majority of it, I just wanted somebody to come and take the job. It's not something I ever wanted to do or ever would want to do again. So the team that I wanted to come and take over, they were landing at exactly the same time that we got that lady out. So then what we did is with the VMF and rescue, we formed a line across the pile, and we performed something called the line and hail search. So one at a time, you tap and you call out, and then you ask anybody trapped below you to signal. Probably took 3/4 of an hour to like go over the whole pile, and we did that like 1 meter at a time, people shoulder to shoulder. I was as confident as I could be that there were no conscious alive people left underneath that pile. So we came off the pile for the last time, and we went where no one could see us, none of the public could see us, and we held hands, like all the people in Orange who were just there, community above self. They were there rescuing total strangers. So we held hands, and I said something like, you've just done something impossible that when I arrived, I thought we would have been lucky to get a couple of people out of there, but to get 7 people out of that building alive was amazing. And I said that they would always remember it, and they would always remember who they did it with and the people they were touching there. And then we said a prayer for the people who hadn't come out alive, and we did a minute's silence, and for the first time, more than 28 hours later, we packed up and we left that site. And this has been recorded more than 3 weeks later, and it's still very, very, very raw. It's very hard to talk about, and there's all these people calling us heroes, and for whatever reason that's really hard to hear, because I think if Superman was there, he would have got all 9 people out alive. But so no one came out. There's, I don't know how to explain it, but we've received injuries that you can't see. Like, all my bruises are healed, but a lot of the people that did that rescue are still very emotional, and it's very raw. And it's good to be able to sit here, and as hard as it was to tell that story, it's told now. We've looked at everybody. I think everybody in Port Vila knows Pro Medical and Pro Rescue, and because we wear bright orange, everybody in this town knows what we did and the incredible efforts that we made. But to the outside world, looking at social media, you would think that all the overseas teams came in and saved the day. But ironically, the last live person that came out, they were just landing, and sheer determination. They did that. We did it with sheer determination, and we did it. It was the police commissioner allowing somebody to take control of it. It was the VMF with their manpower and their jackhammers. It was Francois and Cyril, the engineers. It was the members of the public that had brought the forklifts and the excavators. And you've got to remember, communication was down. No one told anybody to come down there. Everybody arrived on that site because they saw a need and they wanted to help the community. So this big group of people with a single-minded focus to get people out, that's why it worked. It worked because this big group of people were able to work together and not give up, and no one was going to go home until we thought that everybody was out. So yeah, that's why I'm sitting here doing this. Also, if this was ever to happen again, I don't want to be trying to rescue a 13-year-old boy with an airbag that's meant for a road crash rescue. If this was ever going to happen again, I want a fucking airbag that's meant to lift concrete. So we've started a GoFundMe, and I really want the equipment and then the training that goes behind that equipment, because we're a Pacific nation. The Australian team, I think, was the first to arrive at 4 o'clock that afternoon, 27 hours after, and I believe that is actually a timely response. Like, you know, for them to mobilize, load the plane up, get their people, get here, 27 hours was a good time. Like, they didn't waste any time. But for that 27 hours, there were things that could be done and things that we did do. But if we ever do it again, I want to do it with the equipment that's meant for it, meant to do building collapses, and I want more training on that equipment. The excavators are here, the big forklifts here, construction companies with jackhammers and concrete saws are here, and like any community, the community came together. From a pro rescue side, from a rescue service side, we were trying to rescue people with equipment that wasn't designed for it. The airbags that we have are meant for road crashes. So what we want to do is be ready for next time. We want airbags that are designed to lift buildings. We want the training that goes behind this equipment. So we have a GoFundMe that we're trying to raise money to, and none of that is cheap. To buy this stuff new is like $50,000, but we don't need anything new. This uniform that I'm wearing would have been worn by somebody in the Australian SES. Very little of Pro Rescue's equipment is new. So if anybody's listening to this and you have some equipment, some USAR specific equipment that you're not using anymore, or you want to donate, like, we need to be ready for next time. We need equipment specific for the job, and we need the training that goes behind it. Just to finish off, I'd like to thank the Pro Rescue team. So no one that was wearing orange on that day was getting paid. They're all volunteers. Every Tuesday night from the second week of January to the second week of December, we train. And that training paid off, even though it wasn't specific for like a USAR event. The trust that we had in each other, of working together and knowing each other's strengths, I was able to task the right people to the right jobs. So the Pro Rescue team, and normally when there's a road crash, we call them on the phone, like, can you attend a road crash? No one asked anybody to come to that site. Every single person in orange that came down there on their own, and most people didn't leave once they were there. They risked their lives for strangers, and they are incredible. So I am so proud of them, and I'm so proud of Pro Rescue, and yeah, they did something impossible.